Welcome to the Georgia Lacrosse Officials Association presentation on the goal, field, ball, and equipment, NFHS Boys Lacrosse rules, and we are using the rules for the 2025 season. All right, this is a pretty straightforward presentation. This is Rule 1, and we are talking about the field to play and the stuff you need to play lacrosse, okay? This is a standard federation field. You'll find this in Rule 1, 2, 7 through 8. I have overlaid the lacrosse lines in yellow over a standard football field. For most of us playing in Georgia at the high school level, football's king, so we will be playing on a football field. So this gives you a nice reference point to kind of see what's going on. But a standard lacrosse field does not have any of these numbered lines and hash marks from a football field. Okay. So let's talk about what we've got going on here. We've got the center line or the midline. In football, this is the 50-yard line. And then we've got our two wing lines, which are these guys right here. And that's going to be really important for face-offs. This is our substitution area. It's two cones on either side of the midline at the 45-yard marker. So the substitution area is 10 yards wide. And during live ball play, this is the only place that players can come off the field from either team. And players can substitute onto the field from either team during live ball play. We've got our far sideline at the top of the screen and what we call our bench sideline at the bottom of the screen. There are two end lines, and you will note that these go through the middle of the football end zone. These are the defensive restraining lines. They are on the 30-yard line, and they are essentially used during a face-off to limit and restrict which players can participate as the whistle is blown to begin a face-off. These are the two creases. These are the areas in which the goal is kept and the goalie gets certain provisions, protections, and privileges. We have our goal line, which we've talked about in our key definitions. That's going to be on the 10-yard line in any standard federation field. So that's a nice reference point. The area formed by the defensive restraining line and these essential extensions of the wing lines and the end line is called the attack box. And this is important for counts, particularly the 10 count, the clearing count. Once a team has crossed to the midline and they have possession of the ball, they have 10 seconds to step it into the attack box. This is also important when we get to stalling, which I have sort of hinted at in our previous presentation. And then these areas are called the alleys. And these are really important because if a team on an offensive, on their offensive end is, let's say we have a loose ball technical foul and we are going to award possession, and that took place in the alley, or that took place in the attack box, we are going to move the ball laterally into the alley. So you will often find yourself saying to players, hey, blue, take it out into the side right in the alley. That's where we're going to restart play. Now, I've zoomed out a little bit here, and you can see we've got the area around the field. So you'll see the limit line. This is a really important line that you need to have in lacrosse. We don't want anybody inside that limit line on either sideline. As officials, we are often going to work in the out of bounds area. And it's important to, when you're running down the field and you need to step out into that area, that there aren't players and fans and cameramen. I have run into very large people running down the field and not looking. I have run into very expensive cameras. They cannot be in those areas. You will also note that there are no limit lines on the end line. That is because unless you have built-in stands or protection screens that prevent shots from whizzing into those people, you're not allowed to have anybody there. You're going to get grandparents and parents and friends who just want to hang out back there because it gives you a great view of what's going on. But unless they're protected, they can't be there. Now, in 2025, we have added a coach's box. This is an area on either side of the substitution area. That substitution area is 6 feet deep from the bench sideline towards what you'll see as the table area, and that's an area where players can substitute in and out. They can only be in that area if their substitution is imminent, and that is basically within 10 yards of a player coming off, they can be in that area. On either side of that is the coach's box, and nobody but the coaches can be in that box, and they can be there. They can be with somebody who is not quite yet to substitute, but is about to substitute. We really want to keep what we call this box area and the substitution area clean, because the people at the table, who are your timekeeper and your scorekeepers and your spotters and your penalty clock operator, they need to be able to see the officials give signals and see what's going on in the game. And we really want to make those sight lines pretty wide open for them. And then you've got your standard coaches area. Again, coaches are the only people that are allowed to be in there. And you've got your team areas. That's where the players need to be. So they need to be off that sideline so that we have areas to work. So here, again, as I mentioned, the coach's box is new this year. It's not a staging area for players, keeps that box clean, and it's really important that we do that. Being a table personnel is a tough enough job if you can't see what the referee is signaling or whether a goal's been scored or what's going on. All right, now there is the opportunity for what we call a universal field. This is Rule 121. And the Federation and USA Lacrosse and a number of schools really petitioned for this because it makes it easier and a little cleaner. If you have to line a field, if you've actually got to paint the lines, doing a boys lacrosse and a girls lacrosse can be expensive. So what they allowed was essentially a slight modification to both the girls and the boys field, and we sort of play it. In this case, the field, instead of being 100 yards long, is 110 yards long. And we're going to move the creases from the 10-yard line back. We are also going to extend out where the end line is, not in the middle of the end zone, but now on the actual end line. So that's what we've done. And then we move the creases back to the women's line here. So let's talk about lines. This is Rule 122. Lines need to be non-caustic. They used to use lye, and so it would burn your flesh if you touched it. Most lines can be 2 to 4 inches wide. The goal line must be 2 inches, and the midline must be 4 inches. We've already talked about why the goal line needs to be 2, and that's because you are creating a plane on the rear edge of the goal line formed by the goal line and the crossbar and the goal posts in order to define what a goal is. The midline needs to be 4 inches because the midline is where you have face-offs, and you want each player's cross to be 4 inches away from each other as they begin the face-off. They can be white or contrasting colors. Many fields will have multiple lines. So the field on the right is a field where I was working as a clinician at University of North Carolina, and these were their rec fields. And there's 17 different lines for 17 different sports and 17 different directions. And so as an official, you may have to, at the beginning of the game, confirm with coaches and players, hey, we've got a black crease, we've got a red end line, we've got yellow sidelines, right? It can get a little wackadoo. This is the midfield line, and that is a very important line in terms of deciding whether somebody is offsides whether you have over and back, a number of other situations. I would note that even in football, it is required to have a midline. Um, Athletic directors and booster clubs and the fans really love their midfield logo. And so you have these very intricate midfield logos that are painted and stenciled and sketched. But we need to have a solid or a shadow bordered line. Okay, so what you'll see here is you can see that slight shadow line that's happening, and we really want to make sure that we can see this. If you fail to have a midline, a clearly defined midline or shadow line, it's a technical foul to start the game. So you're essentially not going to have a face-off. You're simply going to award the ball to the other team. Um, this is also true of sidelines and end lines. This was a rule that came in a couple of years ago. This is Buford High School, and for a number of seasons, they did not have an end line going through their very snazzy team name, school name written in the end zone. It's really hard to officiate whether the ball goes out of bounds or people have stepped out of bounds. And coaches will yell at you, and you will say, "Coach, I don't know what side of the imaginary line he was on." So again, failure to have a continuously marked sideline, technical foul to start the game, no face-off. This is a rule. Both the midline, sidelines, and end lines are a rule that you should enforce in a high school game. In a youth game, I'm less inclined to really worry about this rule. You're going to get a lot of wackadoo youth fields that don't necessarily meet the requirements. But in high school, when we're talking about seedings and standings and playoffs and all that stuff, as those games become more important, we need to hold these teams to making sure that their fields are ready for play and ready for us to officiate. So you're gonna enforce these at the high school level, and then there's a process that we'll talk about in later presentations where you write up a game report so that we can send that off to the GHSA. So in this diagram, you can see the position of all of those cones. So we have the 4 cones on the end line where the sidelines come together. We've got the cone on the far sideline on the 50, and we've got our 2 cones for the substitution area. I will note that you're going to go out onto a field, and Billy's mom and Steve's dad are going to have put a cone where any 2 lines come together, and you want to make sure that you only have the 7 cones that are required. Cones need to be soft and flexible. They can be cones or they can be pylons. You do not particularly want the construction giant yellow parking cones. Those are not particularly soft or flexible. They need to be red or orange. Those are your only 2 options. You're going to have 7 cones, 1 at each corner, where the sideline and end lines come together. You're going to have 1 on the midfield line at the far sideline and 2 at the substitution area to define that area. All right, Rule 1-3, Article 1 through 3. Goals are 6 by 6. Again, I've mentioned that it's a 1.5 inch pipe. They can be in-ground, flat iron, obtuse, or 90 degrees. You'll read all about that in Rule 1. They must be orange. There is no other color that the goalpost or crossbar can be. They can't be black, they can't be blue, they can't be yellow, they can't be green. They have to be orange. You can use ground anchors. These are basically like tent stakes that hold the cage in place. A lot of the fields that we have here in Georgia are astroturfed, so ground stakes won't be used. The home team is responsible for providing 2 legally equipped goals, and failure to provide legally equipped goals is a 3-minute non-releasable unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. And this is a big one, right? You're going to put one team man down for 3 minutes, but you're going to play the game, and then you're going to send a report in. I have worked games where one goal was 6 by 6 and the other was 5 by 5. But remember, we're going to switch at every quarter, so everybody's going to have to deal with this particular issue. Nets, pyramidal shaped cord netting, fastened 7 feet at the rear of the goal, can't exceed 1.25 inches. Any solid color, so you can't have the net be a different color, but it can be orange or black or blue, whatever, any solid color. And it's recommended that they be attached at the ground. Lacrosse balls must include the National Operating Committee on Standards for Athletic Equipment, or what we call NOCSE, and the NFHS authenticating mark. You can see they're supplied by the home team. If both coaches agree and notify the referee, the color of the ball may be changed. And that color is almost by default going to be white, but yellow, orange, green are options. We also have the NOCSE. You can see here the NOCSE stamp and the NFHS authenticating mark. All right, additional game equipment. You need to have a scoreboard. Now that can be the little flip scoreboard on the right or the big fancy Jumbotron scoreboard on the left. You literally could have a clipboard that's propped up where we've got numbers written down in marker. But you have to have a visible scoreboard. You need to have a clock. Now that clock may be one of these guys, the dual time clock, or it may be a visible clock on the scoreboard. You want to make sure that there is a clock that is working. It can literally be somebody's cell phone or a watch. You need to supply balls and cones, and for varsity and junior varsity games, you really do need a book. This is where the scorekeeper is going to mark the score. They're going to write down all the players' penalties, when people call timeouts, assists, everything that happens in the game, and that is required. Now, the last thing that I'm going to mention here is you need a horn, a working horn. It may be that you have a horn that is on the scoreboard, so you might be able to hit a button on the clock and the horn blows, but when the period ends, we need to be able to blow the horn, and we need a horn in case coaches need to request an officials conference. In that case, you would wait until a dead ball, and then the table or the coach would request that the officials come over with a double blast of the horn in order to determine a misapplication of a rule, to confirm what the score is, to see if a player had released early from the penalty box or a player that was not allowed to go into the game had in fact gone into the game. So that you need a working horn at the table at all times, or at least for the table to be in communication with somebody who can blow a horn. I have worked a game where they rolled somebody's pickup truck up to right behind the table personnel, and when we needed a horn, the person literally honked their horn. So, let's not be too good on some of this stuff. As a side note, if you do not know how to work a dual timer clock, or you do not know how to work a timer on your iPhone or Android device, you are going to want to figure that out. And when you get to a field that's got one of these big Jumbotron deals, you're going to want to know how that works as well, because you're going to work games where some parent's going to come down from the sideline to help you out, and they're not necessarily going to have a lot of experience doing that. So it's a good practice to, when you get out there, to play around with it before a game, in between games, after a game, so that you understand how it all works, how you can reset the time, how you can start it and stop it, update the score, period, timeouts, all that kind of stuff.
The GLOA is involved in a number of memorial funds, and we support those through our members donating game checks, as well as making regular donations. And we have 3 charitable funds that we contribute to. The Ron Maloney Fund enables high school players who best exemplify Ron's spirit. He was one of the founding members of the GLOA, back in the 90s. Um, are able to apply. Their coach sends in a recommendation for players to attend lacrosse summer camp. Most of these kids go to the Georgia Tech summer camp, and they get a full ride. They get full board. They get to go for a week. They get to develop their skills. These are kids who probably wouldn't otherwise be able to afford to do that. And we have sent over 100 kids since this fund was established in 2005, and it's amazing. It's one of my favorite things of being an official is being at the championship game at halftime and being able to give these kids their certificates and take a photo and let them go to lacrosse camp in the summer. The Kevin Moore Fund. Kevin Moore was one of the, again, earlier officials in the state, and he essentially had my job. He was the lead trainer for the GLOA. And this fund provides financial assistance to officials who want to attend professional development. So when we used to have LaxCon, you could get money to sort of offset the costs of going to LaxCon. Right now, we are using this to support our training and observation program to really help grow the game in the state of Georgia. And this is a really helpful fund that allows us to get out there with our observation program and give real-time feedback on a regular basis to officials, because that's how you get better. And then, of course, we have the Gordon Corsetti Mental Agility Foundation. This is run through actually the Gordon Corsetti Mental Agility Foundation. Um, uh, Gordon's father, Lou, is heading this up, and this raises funds for suicide prevention and mental illness research. Gordon was a good friend of mine and one of the really important guys who took the training program here in Georgia and then later at USA Lacrosse and really elevated it to a level that it had not ever been at. More information on this can be found at galaxref.com. If you're interested in making a donation to any of these funds, please contact president at galaxref.com. You can also shoot me an email or a text. But I know a lot of folks outside of Georgia use these presentations, and if any of you could help us out with any of these really wonderful causes, that would be lovely.
All right. Again, my name is Greg Height. I'm the lead trainer for the Georgia Lacrosse Officials Association and a USA Lacrosse clinician. Please reach out to me if you have any issues that you need addressed.